Hi, welcome back to No Rest for the Scientist. Today we're going to be answering the questions that you guys have sent in about Alzheimer's disease.
So I did my PhD in Alzheimer's disease and inflammation, so I thought I would use my expertise in the area to answer some questions that you guys had sent in.
Okay, so the first question that we've got today is, are dementia and Alzheimer's the same thing? Isn't it dementia is like a type of Alzheimer's? Like one causes the other?
Kind of, it's not quite as simple as that. So the first thing to kind of talk about is what is dementia. What would you think dementia is? How would you describe dementia to someone?
I guess it includes memory loss and a breakdown of function in the brain.
Yeah, good. So dementia is not a disease. It is the clinical symptoms that arise. So usually associated with dementia is memory loss or something called cognitive dysfunction. So that can be forgetting of language, memory, not being able to dress yourselves properly, and so on and so forth. Alzheimer's disease is the leading cause of dementia. So Alzheimer's disease itself is a disease and is most widely responsible for dementia seen in society today. But it's not the only cause. There are other diseases as well which cause dementia, and there are four which are the most common. Alzheimer's disease being the most, I think is around 70% or so, something like that. And then you have others, one called vascular dementia, which is primarily associated with things like stroke. Then you have frontotemporal dementia, and then you have dementia with Lewy bodies as well. So it's not just Alzheimer's disease which causes dementia, there are various different causes.
Okay, next question. What is frontotemporal dementia and how is that different from Alzheimer's?
Yes, so as I said in the previous question, there are many different causes of dementia. One of the diseases which causes it is something called FTD, or frontotemporal dementia. So the clue is kind of in the name for this disease, FTD, frontotemporal. So it affects the frontal part and the temporal parts of the brain. So your brain is broken down into four different what's called lobes. The parietal, the frontal, the temporal and the occipital lobes of the brain. And I'll put a diagram up just to show you, hey look, this is where the parts of the brain are. So yes, FTD affects the frontal lobes, which is behind the eyes, and then the temporal lobes, which is just inside where the ears would be. And if you compare the brains of someone who has Alzheimer's disease and FTD, someone who has FTD, they would specifically have degeneration in the front part of their brain and the temporal parts.
Okay, question 3. What drugs are available for Alzheimer's?
So the unfortunate thing about Alzheimer's disease at the moment, it is incurable. That's kind of important to emphasize. Unfortunately, there's been many instances of tabloids where you've seen, like on the front page, wonder drug for Alzheimer's disease, miracle cure, etc., etc. Unfortunately, it's just not the case. The last time we had a new drug available for Alzheimer's disease was in 2003. That's 17 years ago. So we have two primary therapies that are available, which target different things. So one of the main neurotransmitters associated with memory in the brain is called acetylcholine, and you have drugs which basically prevent the breakdown of this neurotransmitter. I think they're called GALANTAMINE and RIVASTIGMINE and DONEPEZIL are the three different drugs that are available for that, but they all carry out the same thing. The other one is something called mementin, mementin. And what happens in the brain is when neurons start to degenerate, they release another neurotransmitter called glutamate. And if neurons get stimulated with it too much, they die. So what happens is mementin, if you give mementin to these patients, it basically prevents this toxicity. So it prevents further neuron damage through this glutamate release. But this doesn't prevent the progression of disease. This just helps regulate and kind of dampen the clinical symptoms you see. So, and over time they stop working. So they're good for early stage Alzheimer's disease, and they may help preserve memory and function for a while. But the key thing is, and that's why research is so important, is that they stop working and progression of the disease carries on.
And actually, you've already answered the next question, and that is Alzheimer's curable? And unfortunately,
yes,
the answer to
unfortunately
that is
it isn't. So there are many different research avenues going on. I myself was primarily looking at the role of inflammation, and the reason is because, for example, someone that has type 2 diabetes, which is massively associated with bodily inflammation, have I think a 40% increased risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. And other inflammatory diseases, from arthritis to periodontitis, which is inflammation of the gums, are all linked to an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease, which is pretty crazy really. 20 years ago we had an indication that that might be the case, but we didn't really look into it all that much. Now it seems like it's a pivotal importance for the progression of the disease, but
wow.
As it stands, no cure.
So last question is, what is vascular dementia?
Vascular dementia is, again, dementia, so memory loss, cognitive dysfunction, but it's associated with dysfunction of the vasculature, or the blood vessels of the brain. So this happens when oxygen reaching the brain is inhibited in some way. The biggest risk factor for vascular dementia is stroke. Obviously, if you have a stroke, you're cutting off your oxygen supply to your brain, especially if it's a ischemic stroke, so a clot. And that is primarily associated with the clinical symptoms you see. It's not the only cause, and there are other risk factors associated with vascular dementia: smoking, bad diet, the general bog standard, lifestyle interventions that you can change. But yeah, this is primarily associated with the blood vessels and the vasculature. People with Alzheimer's disease often have vascular dementia as a comorbidity, meaning they have both. And the reason that is because one of the proteins that can link to Alzheimer's disease can become deposited in the blood vessels of the brain, and it almost acts like a fat where it just blocks the blood flow, and that can also contribute to dementia caused by damage to the blood vessels.
Okay, so can you restore proper blood flow in someone who has it?
So in theory, yes. So lifestyle interventions, right? So think about heart disease. So when you get like fatty deposits in your arteries, you can fix that by eating properly and exercising well. So in theory, yes. So if, for example, perhaps you had high cholesterol or you were medically overweight, something you would potentially consider would be to completely overturn your diet and your lifestyle. And in theory, that could help reverse that kind of blockage within the brain in terms of blood flow.
Well, that is the last question answered.
So if this was interesting, if you have any other questions, please do let us know. With that, in terms of Alzheimer's disease, this is and dementia generally, this is just scratching the surface, right? So if you have any questions about this in further detail, please do let us know. There were some others I just didn't have time to get to, so we're going to compile those for another video. If you have any suggestions about maybe me digging a little bit deeper in terms of Alzheimer's disease and dementia, also let me know on that, and I'll be able to put a video out on that. And then also, if you have any other ideas in terms of topics, then please do post them down in the comments below. So yeah, I think that's everything.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Bye.